everybody. First and foremost, I have to say that I appreciate that this is a setting where everybody is eating and drinking, because that means not everybody's wearing masks. And at church, since we've been back in person since actually the end of May in 2020, everybody's been having to wear masks and trying to giving sermons and public speaking when everybody's got masks on. It's really hard to gauge your audience, and so I'm appreciative of that. So hopefully I don't bore you today, because I'll be able to tell a little bit better perhaps than usual. So first of all, second of all, I suppose, I'd be remiss if I didn't wish those who celebrate today a happy and good Friday, and also those who celebrate on Sunday a happy Easter. Now, George, being Greek Orthodox, and myself, we actually don't celebrate Easter this coming weekend. We began Lent only on March 15th, and the Orthodox Easter this year is not until May 2nd. The Orthodox, to calculate Easter, still use the older calendar, the Julian calendar, versus the Western churches, quote-unquote Catholicism, Protestant churches, use the Gregorian calendar for calculating Easter. So hence why there's this differentiation on the date of Easter, which happens fairly often. But we as Orthodox like to joke about it, because it's always either the same day or later than Easter for everybody else. And it's like, oh, we get the sale on Easter candy and whatnot, So this is a year of that, actually, because it's a month different this year, which is crazy. So, but one of the reasons that I think George has invited me here today to speak to you all, and honestly, actually, I had the honor of going to the Capitol and speaking to the State House of Representatives about a week ago, is because as a priest and pastor of the Greek Orthodox Church, this time of the year is very important, because we've just celebrated in the past week, the week before this week, on March 25th, Greek Independence Day. This is actually the bicentennial of Greek independence. And the bicentennial is a big deal. And I was joking about this actually at church recently, that I actually wasn't alive in 1976. I was born in 1982, but I've seen videos and pictures and whatnot from 1976 of our country, the United States' bicentennial, and it's a big deal, like a really big deal. And so this is a big deal for the people of Greece. It's a big deal for people of the Greek diaspora, like George, like his family. And honestly, it's a big deal for myself as a Greek Orthodox priest. Now, if one looks at my last name, which is, I think, perhaps on those sheets there, and if you look at it closely, you see like Emer, and you're like, that doesn't sound like a Greek last name. And that's correct. It's not a Greek last name. I'm not of Greek descent. My ethnic roots are from the Netherlands, Germany, and Ireland. So actually, really nowhere near Greece. That's like opposite ends of the continent, really. So why am I here speaking to you about Greek independence as a Greek Orthodox clergyman? It stems from a journey that began when I was in college. A journey where I discovered the richness, the depth, and the history of the Orthodox Church that traces its lineage back to Jesus Christ, to his apostles, and to their successors. And I additionally encountered in a really new and profound manner the focus on the reality of Jesus Christ becoming man and the ramifications of that fact. However, before I go further into that reality, it actually, I feel like, would behoove us, because I'm assuming most of us here are born in the United States like myself, and are Americans and have been Americans for generations, and might think like, okay, that's great, we can hear about Greece or Greek independence, we can respect that about George and his family, they're Greek, etc. But why is that relevant for us? And I think it would actually be important for three things to point out about that, how we as Americans are directly affected by this reality of Greece, Greek independence, and the history of Greece. and beyond what we're used to. Because we're used to hearing about Greece in school, like, oh, democracy and the old Greek gods and etc., all of those things from way of old. But that's actually not one of the three things that I'm going to talk about. First of all, directly correlates to our generation, or maybe the generation before us. We owe a very, very big debt of gratitude to Greece and the people of Greece for their involvement in World War II. They really were a very, very important stronghold against the Axis powers. Greece was invaded by Italy in 1940, in October of 1940, and they put up such a valiant fight against the Italians, against all odds. The Italians thought, oh, we're just going to march in there and it'll be easy. They put up such a valiant fight that Hitler had to divert forces from Russia to Greece to help the Italians. And Churchill and other leadership of the Allied powers point out that fact that if it wasn't for Greece being so strong against the Italians and Hitler having to divert forces there, he might have been able to overrun the Soviet Union. That might have greatly, greatly, greatly changed the course of World War II. It might have ended with an Axis victory and everything that would have come of that. So we as Americans, as having been part of the Allied forces in World War II, Allied powers, owe a very, very big debt of gratitude to Greece and the Greek people for how valiantly they fought in World War II. Point two is we, as I think most everybody here, are probably of European descent if you go back far enough. We also owe a very, very big debt of gratitude to the Greek people and really the Eastern Roman Empire, which we in our common parlance call the Byzantine Empire, who were Greeks for the most part. Also the stronghold in the sort of frontline people that the Eastern Roman Empire was versus the invading hordes that were coming from the east, be it the Ottomans, be it the Turks, be it the Mongols, be it whatever else it might be. Really in the onslaught of Islam. No offense to anybody if they're of that descent or have that background. But Constantinople and the Eastern Roman Empire had to be on the front lines over and over and over and over and over again, and was for 1,100 years, pushing back, and really protecting the rest of Europe, and protecting really the European heritage and the Christian heritage of that. Because if we know anything about history, Islam was a force that came with armies and with the sword. And so we're somewhat familiar, I think a lot of people, with how in Spain it kind of held back that surge of Islam and of the powers from there. But also in the Eastern Roman Empire also had this very important aspect as well as point two. Point three, and this is of course the most important point for me as a Christian clergyman, as an Orthodox Christian clergyman, is the reality of that the church was fostered in the Eastern Mediterranean world, was fostered in this tub of the Greek world. All of the New Testament is written in Greek. All of the early churches, other than perhaps Rome, which, side note, actually many of the early popes of Rome were of Greek descent themselves. Side note closed. If you look at the ancient patriarchates, the ancient heads of the church, Jerusalem, Antioch, Alexandria, Constantinople, earlier Byzantium. And then if you look at the places where, for example, St. Paul wrote to, the Colossians, the Thessalonians and Thessaloniki, the Galatians, etc., etc. These are all people, for the most part, of Greek descent. And no matter if you're Orthodox, Catholic, Protestant, whatever it might be, we have to respect that reality of that the church grows out of this world. We also owe a very big debt of gratitude to the people of Greece and those of Greek descent, then, because of their willingness to accept the gospel of Jesus Christ. They had all of their gods there from all. We saw St. Paul go to Athens, and they're like, we have all of our gods. We have this unknown God here. But they were ready to hear about Jesus Christ, and the seeds were planted there. And we all, as Christians, those who are Christians, bear the fruit of that and have garnered the fruit of that from the Greeks of old. So those 3 points are very important and applicable for us who, even if we have nothing to do with Greece, or Greece other than knowing George or something like that. Now, a little bit further than that, something that's very important and applicable to this concept of independence or freedom is something that's also very applicable and at the roots and at the heart of our Christian faith. And a principle that's not always present at the surface, and that being eleftheria, freedom. Freedom, this is a word that actually appears over and over and over again, especially in St. Paul's epistles. God didn't create us simply to follow rules or to be robots. He could have done that. But he created us out of his divine love as dynamic beings with the free will to utilize the potentiality that's given to us. And God grants us the freedom to engage with the mystery of life from the day of our birth. And in Greek, there's this really nice expression which I appreciate, that is wished to a woman who's about to give birth. And what's that expression, George? Kallieleftheria. Good, this actually literally means good freedom. Kind of a funny, I remember when I first learned this phrase, I was like, good freedom, that's and I was like, who is this being wishing it to the mother? And I kind of get it, for the mother, like she's been carrying around this special blessing within her, for months and months. And with my wife having given birth to 2 children, I know how difficult that gets, especially later on, trying to from day to day. Okay, so is it good freedom from that? Or is it something else? I actually like to think of this wish as something that's a wish really for the new child who's about to be born. Good freedom, kallieleftheria. This freedom that you are about to be endowed with as a human being born into this world. Good freedom. As we read in St. Paul's letter to the Galatians, we are called to freedom. However, with that freedom comes a great responsibility. St. Paul continues with his teaching us that we need to use that freedom wisely. To use that freedom wisely, not for our own selfish means, but as servants, following the example in the way of the Lord himself. So, returning once again to the thought of the Greek people, it's no mistake that on March 25th, this was the day chosen by the Greek people to declare their independence. 25th, in fact, is the day of the Feast of the Annunciation. It's 9 months before Christmas to the day. This is the day that the Archangel Gabriel announced to Mary that she would give birth to the Messiah, the one who would give the world the opportunity for freedom from sin and death. So Jesus Christ, who himself said that he came to serve and not be served, served as an example to the heroes of the Greek Revolution. And they chose to put their own livelihood at risk in order to open the doors to freedom for others. We are all called to this same high calling of facilitating this opportunity for those around us. And I have that potentiality, you all have that potentiality in a very concrete manner as those who serve in leadership, in the community, maybe in the government, wherever you serve, to use that freedom wisely as an opportunity to serve our brothers and sisters out of love. But out of love. God is the all-powerful one, could have made us robots pulling our strings like puppets. Instead, he gave us being made in his image and likeness, the ability to be co-creators and co-workers with him in this mystery of life. And this is the beauty of the freedom that he has given us, in which we facilitate in a country like the United States. A country which actually, takes a lot of its initial concepts of democracy and freedom and all of this from the Greeks of old. And really, actually, there were many Philhellenes, many who supported the movement of the Greek independence out of respect to that, who came from the United States. We don't force people into submission, but we foster a society where it's a joy and an honor to serve our brothers and sisters and to employ our freedom wisely. And as we honor the heroes of the Greek Revolution on March 25th at this bicentennial, people who also sought inspiration, as I said, in the heroes of the American Revolution, may we all be inspired by them to honor God's image found in each and every one of us as people of freedom, using that freedom out of love for our neighbor, whomever they might be. Because when we do that, this ultimately gives glory to God, our Creator. And at this point, I am open to any questions or thoughts, or if anybody wants to go back and ask about, wait, tell me more about the calendars again, because that's actually, it's a fun subject unto itself, and anyways. But thank you all for giving me the opportunity to be with you today, to speak with you, to share some thoughts and feelings about Greece, about the Greek Revolution, about our Christian faith, and I thank George also for that opportunity as well. Yes, sir.
You speak Greek?
Ναι, μιλάω ελληνικά. Μιλάω Olendica. We should have been there. It'd be a good opportunity for me to practice my Greek sitting with George, because I don't use it quite as much as I did in Macon, not quite as much as I did in Charlotte. He mentioned that I was the assistant at there's a big Greek Orthodox cathedral in Charlotte, and it is many people there who are first generation, having come from Greece. So it was a very different. There, the coffee hour began with kalimera, which is like good morning. Here, it begins with good morning. So, anyways, so long story short, yes, I speak Greek.
Greek heritage family, and yet you become a Greek Orthodox priest. So how has the transition for you been in a primarily Greek? I assume most of the Greek Orthodox members are Greek heritage. Has it been difficult for you to assimilate a bit into that heritage?
So that's a really good question. And so actually our parish in Macon, I would say, is probably, I don't want to say half and half, but it might be half those who grew up in the Orthodox Christian faith and perhaps have Greek heritage, or maybe some other traditional sort of Orthodox country, be it like Serbia or Russia or Albania or wherever it might be. And then probably about half are those who have converted to Orthodox Christianity, which is a really beautiful thing. And our parish is maybe a little more diverse in that nature. So my wife is actually half Greek. She grew up in the Orthodox Church, but I became Orthodox myself in college. When we were dating at that point, I mean, full disclosure, but she never pushed me. She never there was never any pressure of oh, you need to do this thing, you need to become what I am. Just actually her example of a faithful Greek Orthodox Christian, while in college, was, something very eye-opening for me, really. So I grew up myself in a couple different Protestant denominations. I was baptized in the United Church of Christ, and then I went to a Methodist church for a short amount of time when we had moved. And in college, I was really in this sort of seeking place, and really dove a lot into church history, and I knew about Orthodoxy because my wife, so I was familiar with it, but I also was researching like Catholicism, and my mother was actually, at least nominally, Roman Catholic. And but really the example of my then girlfriend and her faithfulness, and then that along with the nature of the history of the Orthodox Church and the depth and the really unchangingness of the dogma.